The first time I met her, I thought she was joking. I was on assignment for Galactic Horizons, sent to cover an unusual diplomatic gathering on the frontier planet of Valera 9, a world famous for its floating crystal towers and erratic magnetic storms. The story was supposed to be simple: humans attending a cultural exchange with a newly discovered alien civilization. But then I met Lysera, and suddenly the story wasn't about me covering an event, it was about me being in one. Lysera was tall, much taller than any human, at least 7 feet, and her skin shimmered like liquid silver under the twin suns. Her eyes were deep pools of violet, reflecting light in a way that made it impossible to tell where she ended and the air around her began. She wore ceremonial robes that rippled with movement, and around her neck was a delicate chain that seemed to hum faintly. You're the human journalist," she said, her voice melodic, almost musical, yet carrying a weight that made everyone nearby stop and stare. "I've heard much about you." I blinked. Usually people who heard much about me were editors, fellow reporters, or my mom, not alien dignitaries. "Yes," I said, trying to sound confident though my stomach had gone entirely dry. "That would be me." Lysera smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made me feel like she could see straight into my mind. "I have a proposition," she said. "A binding one." I laughed. Nervously. Sure. You mean for an interview?" "No," she said, tilting her head, and the light caught her skin in a way that made her appear almost translucent. "For marriage." I choked on my laughter. My first reaction was disbelief. Surely this was some ceremonial greeting, a ritual joke aliens played on humans for their amusement. "Marriage," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. "Like legally? Or culturally?" She reached into a floating pouch at her side and retrieved a thin, metallic tablet. With a flick of her fingers, it unfolded in the air, revealing what looked like a contract, but the symbols danced, rearranging themselves, forming words in galactic common that I could actually read. "This is a binding contract," it said. "Sign, and you are joined to Lysera of the Near-Age Consortium in accordance with their ancient rights. Refusal after initiation will have consequences as determined by the Consortium Council." I laughed again, more forcefully this time, partly out of fear, partly out of disbelief. "Okay," I said. "This has to be a joke. You don't mean marriage, right?" Lysera's smile didn't waver. "I assure you, human. The joke is on those who doubt the seriousness of the consortium. You may choose to participate, or decline and face the consequences. The choice is yours." Consequences. The word echoed in my mind. I glanced around. The other delegates looked tense. I looked at Lysera again. Her eyes were unwavering. I swallowed. My sense of humor had fled. "Okay, what kind of consequences?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. She gestured to the hovering contract. "The human who refuses becomes a matter of record for the consortium. Certain restrictions, socially and legally, would be applied. You would be noted as unreliable, uncooperative, and potentially dangerous to our relations." I froze. This wasn't a joke. This was real. The initiation. Over the next 2 hours, I sat in a quiet chamber with Lysera and her advisors, trying to understand what had just happened. The contract hovered in the air, shimmering with alien script and occasional bursts of light, almost like it was alive. "You don't understand," Lysera said, her voice calm but insistent. "This is not a casual ceremony. The Near-Age take unions seriously. Once you accept, it is binding. But it is also an honor." "An honor?" I repeated. "I barely know you." "Then you will learn," she said simply. "The rights are designed to foster trust, loyalty, and empathy. It is the most intimate bond a Near-Age can form." One of her aides, a smaller, delicate creature with opalescent wings, brought a small device that projected a holographic representation of the ceremony. I watched, stunned, as images of alien architecture, shared energy flows, and ritualized promises appeared. There was a beauty to it, almost hypnotic, but the final image, a glowing, joined emblem of our silhouettes entwined, made my stomach knot. You understand that the contract is legally recognized in the Near Age Consortium? Lysera asked. Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling. I think I understand. Then will you accept? I hesitated. Every rational part of me screamed to refuse. But another part, a part one didn't fully recognize, felt a strange pull toward her. Something about Lysera wasn't just alien. It was magnetic, grounding, and frighteningly intimate. I started. My heart pounded. I don't know if I can. Lysera extended her hand. You must decide. Soon. The council will convene at sunset, and the contract must be signed or declined. I nodded, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like gravity. I couldn't escape. The unexpected connection. Over the next day, I spent time with Lysera, trying to understand her world and the Near-Age culture. I learned that their marriage was less about romance in the human sense and more about shared consciousness, trust, and mutual responsibility. Partners exchanged energy signatures, which linked them on an emotional and cognitive level. It was terrifying, but also undeniably fascinating. We walked the floating crystal towers together. Lysera introduced me to her culture, her history, her planet. She showed me the sky gardens, where luminescent plants responded to emotions, and the library of minds, where near-age knowledge was stored in living crystal matrices. Through it all, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. When Lysera spoke, I could feel a resonance in my thoughts, a gentle echo of her moods. When she laughed, the sound vibrated through my chest, like a low-frequency hum of electricity. I was connected without even touching her. You are beginning to understand, Lysera said one evening as we watched the twin suns set over Valera 9's horizon. The bond is more than symbolic. It is real human, more real than you have ever felt. I nodded, unable to articulate the complexity of my feelings. There was fear, yes, but also an undeniable curiosity, a longing to explore the connection further. And then, just before I could speak, Lysera touched the metallic chain around her neck, and the contract shimmered once more, projecting words in the air. Acceptance is recommended to avoid consequences. Union strengthens bonds between species. Delay may result in cultural tension. The council meeting. The moment of decision arrived quickly. The Council of the Near Age, a semicircular assembly of towering figures with crystalline appendages and pulsating auras, gathered to witness the acceptance, or refusal, of the human. I was led into the chamber, the contract floating before me like a living entity. Human, Lysera said softly. Are you ready? I swallowed. I think I am. The chamber hummed with energy. The council members' eyes, multifaceted and shimmering, turned toward me. Murmurs in an alien tongue filled the air. The contract floated closer. Then speak the words of acceptance, Lysera instructed. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then repeated the lines the holographic aide had taught me in Galactic Common and in the ancient Near Age language. Each word resonated through me like a chord, vibrating in sync with Lysera's energy. When I finished, the contract pulsed, the symbols coalescing into a single, radiant emblem. The union is official, it declared. A ripple of approval swept through the chamber. The council members lowered their appendages in acknowledgement. Lysera smiled at me, her eyes luminous and soft. You see, she said, taking my hand, sometimes the impossible is just the unfamiliar. Adjusting to the bond. The days that followed were disorienting. I could feel Lysera's emotions, her thoughts sometimes brushing against mine like tendrils of light. In moments of joy, the world seemed to pulse with brilliance. In moments of distress, I felt a low thrum of tension that I could not ignore. We communicated silently at times, sharing ideas without words. I learned things about her life, her planet, her species' philosophy. I also discovered things about myself, reserves of patience, empathy, and courage I had never tapped into. I realized that the marriage was not about control or dominance. It was about understanding, balance, and mutual respect. And slowly, despite the initial fear and absurdity, I began to care deeply for her, not just as a fascinating alien or a story, but as a partner in every sense the Near Age defined. The first challenge. A week after our union, a group of extremist Near Age challenged the legitimacy of our bond. They claimed a human could not truly understand or respect the depth of Near Age tradition. We were summoned to the Grand Hall, where these dissenters confronted us. Their energy flared aggressively, a warning of impending conflict. I felt fear rising, but Lysera's presence steadied me. Her energy flowed into mine, a tide of reassurance and strength. "Do you believe in our union?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. Together, we faced the extremists. Through words, gestures, and the bond of the contract, we demonstrated understanding, patience, and unity. Slowly, the hostility ebbed, replaced by cautious respect. I realized then that the bond was more than ceremonial. It was a bridge between two species. The final revelation. Months passed. The bond deepened. I no longer felt like a human visiting an alien world. I felt like a part of it, a part of Lysera, a participant in a culture I had once thought incomprehensible. One evening, in the quiet of her floating garden, Lysera turned to me. "Do you remember the day you thought I was joking?" I nodded, smiling wryly. I thought the universe had lost its mind. She laughed softly, a melody that harmonized with the crystalline plants around us. Sometimes, the universe only pretends to joke human. Sometimes, it presents an opportunity disguised as absurdity. You accepted, and in doing so, you defied expectation, tradition, and perhaps even probability. I took her hand, feeling the familiar resonance pulse through us. And I don't regret it. Not for a second. Lysera's eyes glimmered. Then we have much to explore together. As the twin suns set over Valera 9, casting long, shimmering shadows across the crystal towers, I realized that what I had once thought impossible, or absurd, had become my reality. A reality that was terrifying, exhilarating, and beautiful. A reality where a human and a Near Age were bound not just by contract, but by understanding, trust, and perhaps love. And in that moment I knew, despite my initial disbelief, despite the absurdity, despite the fear, I had stepped into a future far stranger and far more wondrous than I could have ever imagined.